Hi, everyone. Welcome to the monthly podcast. We have a regular monthly faithful contributor, Mr. Derek Johnson, joining us today once again during the holiday season to give us more clarity and insight on the things that matter most on the geopolitical front. So, if you're new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share. Helps the channel grow and others to gain the knowledge you're currently being afforded. As you know, Mr. Derek Johnson is a retired Army vet, a country music singer, songwriter, musician, and the author of two great best-selling books, The Midnight Rider Rides Again, Part 1 and Part 2. And he's here to offer us more updates on the latest geopolitical statuses with some countries we'll talk about. I'm always, as always, pleased and honored to have the one and only Mr. Derek Johnson join us. Derek, how are you doing today, good sir?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Just another day above the ground's a good day, as my grandpa always said.
He's absolutely right about that, 100%. Well, I know you've got a lot to do during the holiday season and other things to take care of. So I will respect your time and the audience time and press on as always with the questions that I have for you today. So the first thing I'm going to do, Derek, is direct your attention and the audience attention to a couple of articles that I thought were noteworthy that contribute to my first question. As you're probably well aware, there's a lot going on with President Trump in Venezuela right now. Um, Venezuela. Joshua Hall here next, as you can see, Venezuela's former chief of national intelligence, Hugo Carvajal, has officially released every U.S. senator who is on the Venezuela list of politicians who have basically taken millions of dollars of payoffs and kickbacks from the Maduro regime for drugs, pedophilia, trafficking, all the things you and the audience already know. It was an attempt to undermine President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth with the narco terrorists. Now, if we take a look at the list here, Derek, you can see the list of the usual suspects here from the usual states. No surprise, both Republican and Democrats alike. What's interesting, Derek, is that you notice the states that are not on the list, your home state of Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee, to name a few. That was pretty interesting and noteworthy here. And then let me show you this. I'm going to just go over this real quick so the audience can see the full list. I don't think that I went too quickly. I'm going back up again. So again, the usual suspects, as you can all see. And then I'll direct your attention to this next article. Homeland Security Defense Next says, as of yesterday, the Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has been evacuated from Venezuela with the help of President Trump in the U.S. And again, this is as of yesterday, as you can see in the article here below. So here's my first question to you, Derek. With all this being taken into consideration, what does this mean from what you're aware and what you know about this situation vis-a-vis Venezuela in terms of getting rid of Maduro, bringing in sovereign, patriotic leadership to Venezuela, which will restore the people, the economy, and everything to do with it, their sovereignty? And what implications does this have for other countries around the world and removing their corruption thereof?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to start first and foremost. This didn't start overnight. The whole 45-47 operation is a theater. It's pre-planned, strategic, special operation. Meaning, like everything you're watching is not real. It's real from the standpoint of the operation. It's not real in the standpoint of your normal processes of a constitutional government. So it's like, where do you start? I could go this way or that way, but I guess the first things first will be you got to go to the past. Venezuela is directly connected to the Dominion systems, which were Smartmatic and all your voter cheating, the systems, etc. So that's first things first. You got to keep in mind Lou Dobbs was fired from CNN the day after he had said that our future elections, that the implications of this, meaning way back then, this is before President Trump, people, you got to remember that these Dominion systems will have future implications on our voting, meaning adding, taking away. They were already having that. People got to remember that. They were already having that. So swing states, battleground states were your cheating. That's where the cheating was. So all this ties in. Then the faux regime of Venezuela, which was all put there and established with your Obama, Clinton, Bush, etc. All ties into that as well. So there's that. Venezuela, Executive Order 13692. That's all Obama. That's a executive order with a national emergency with Venezuela. All right. So, the very things they said they were doing, if you go read that executive order, it would read and benefit President Trump. It wouldn't read and benefit an Obama. But so if you read it, it says blocking certain persons. Well, if you look at the geographic or the geopolitical environment, if you will, of Venezuela, it don't add up to what Obama and that crew were doing. So everything that President Trump, when he says I've ended 8 wars, well, everything he's talking about when he's talking about Syria, and he's talking about Congo, he's talking about Ukraine, he's talking about Iran, he's talking about Yemen, he's talking about Venezuela. They're all executive orders with national emergencies from the swamp. All right. So when I say things are pre-planned, that means everything's rolling out. To you, ladies and gentlemen, it's just now rolling out. The operation in Venezuela is directly tied to the enhanced counter narcotics operation in the Western Hemisphere that was launched April the 1st, 2020. All right, which was just within months of the clause in Section 1550, which is your War Powers Resolution Act. As we speak right now, to the mainstream media, they're just now, who are they? Some of these congressmen and women are just now using terms War Powers Resolution Act to the public. And this is the thing I've been talking about. And one of the Democrat senators or U.S. representatives, I can't remember which one it was now, but said they were going to try to block U.S. military because of no congressional authorization. There is a congressional authorization. It's in the War Powers Resolution Act. So all this Venezuela ties into that. All right. You saw Mark Kelly there. You saw Chuck Grassley. There's one that would surprise people. A lot of patriots over here think that Chuck Grassley hung the moon and stars because his name is mentioned in Q, and I keep telling people that just because it's mentioned in Q doesn't mean that they're still on your side. All right. It means that, hey, this is an operation. And if you'll remember early on, patriots, the people who are in the know, certain people, we've told you that over 98% of Congress we've wiped out, will be decimated. All right, a restart. We need, which is good for anything. I mean, let's just be honest. In life, sometimes a complete clean out of anything, whether it be a high school coaching staff or a college coaching, it just sometimes a clean, all out wipeout is just good for what ails you, as the saying is. So everybody's witnessing that, and that list there. That it's the classic bait and switch. We bait you up, right? They set it. It's like the tee. If anybody plays golf, President Trump does. You put the tee and the ball on the ground. You're teeing it up, right? It's kind of like t-ball for children. You put the ball on the tee, and it's even funnier when it's a tee though, and someone swings and misses. But still, you tee it up. That's the bait. We baited you. They have Mark Kelly and all these people telling all the military, don't take these orders. They're unlawful and this, that, and other. Here's your switch. See, so everything you're witnessing is going to have a bait and then a switch somewhere along the way. So that's why I tell Republicans, conservatives, patriots, hey, you don't need to be reacting. If you claim to be a patriot, though, you don't need to be reacting. If any kind of reaction, it should be smiling, grinning, because it's a bait. And then we're going to switch it somewhere down here. And then that's going to be the unveiling that, hey, like the people who take up for them, like the liberals taking up for these people, especially Mark Kelly, for example, because he's in his jacket with all his patches on and, he was a captain in the military or whatever, right? So that's the one they really gravitate to because he's the most colorful out of those. So you bait them up, you get them stewing on it, and then you hit them with principle and an integrity. Because at the end of the day, we as humans have to operate straight off of principles and integrity. All right. If we truly want peace, if we truly want a middle ground, then you got to operate with principles and integrity. Because if you're still taking up for Mark Kelly, then you're a hypocrite, right? Because, okay, why do we have laws and orders? Sedition, treason. All right. The very things these people were doing. And they're telling you how to live your life, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, prime example. Oh, I'm MAGA and I'm this and I stood for this. Well, President Trump, one of his main things was what? Wiping out insider fraud, insider information, inside. Of course, you're going to be a millionaire because you have direct what? Background information on what stocks are going to do what? Pop, or which ones are going to drop, right? So she was worth like 3.5 million on the minimum that we know of in insider information. So of course she's going to tell you how to live your life. Of course she's going to be a porcelain doll that looks like she can do no harm, right? So these are the same people, all right? And it's a complete bait switch, a complete posture of showing, hey, this is a clean out. I'm draining the swamp. Here's the swamp. Here's what they say. Here's what they actually do. And that's where we are.
Interesting. Thank you, as always, Derek. So that brings up a couple of sub-point questions within the folder, if you will, of things. So you brought up Lou Dobbs being removed with CNN. So let's touch on that. So the bait and switch, how applicable or how soon will that be applicable for the media, the clean out from the Patriot side? And what were the Dominion voter servers in Venezuela that were controlling swing states like you were talking about earlier?
Well, yeah, and that's why going back to the 2020 election, it was a classic art of war where you prey on to people the right way, right? It wasn't just about the 2020 election. And a lot of Republicans hung on to that because it's the bigger election. It's the presidential election. But on the date of November the 4th, 2020, a four-star general put out a tweet. And I have it in my books too, and I think it's all over my pages. You have to search back a ways because I haven't talked about it recently. But four-star general said we have our military working with our joint partners around the world. But he specifically said the National Security Command and also your Cyber Command. All right, working with our joint partners around the world. Then you got to tie into President Trump's verbiage that he said, our gravest threats are not abroad, they're within. This is in many speeches. He said, our gravest threats are not abroad, they're within. Then you got to take in his executive order for election interference. It says, although no foreign power has altered the outcome or vote tabulation. Well, outcome means the whole thing. And then vote tabulation means January the 6th. See, a lot of people don't even know. A lot of Americans think January the 6th, 2021 was just between President Trump. They think it was some day that was set aside for President Trump versus Joe Biden. They don't realize that January the 6th is a tabulation day for the Electoral College, and it's one of the steps of becoming president. A lot of people don't know that, which is sad. They don't know anything about Title III, Section 15, which outlines even what to do with objections. So there was a lot of firsts that happened that people got to see, and they don't even realize the first time in U.S. history objections have taken place in the voting. And so it's a first for everything. But tying in, no foreign power has altered the outcome. So President Trump, in executive order with a national emergency declared, is telling you there's no foreign power who's altered the outcome. All right. And then you got a four-star general on the day of voting day for the 2020 election telling you that we have our joint commands, cyber commands, and also National Security Command and our joint partners around the world watching. And he was saying specifically, we're watching in hopes that we learn what we learned from 2018 and 2016. Well, why didn't he say just in past? Why did he specifically say 2018, 2016? All right, because we know exactly what 2016 was if you know military laws, military orders, and when all else fails, when the Constitution fails, then you got to do you got to go into a military government, a military occupation. All right, that's the last line of resort before you have a war, a civil war. So, people can be mad out there. They'll just have to get over it. But this was a last resort. The military took over. And that's why there's a 2018 order in place, Title 32, which is National Guard, but it's a presidential federalization. But the National Guard cyber commands have been active at every election, 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024. Military orders are not continuation orders. They have to have congressional authorization. All right. There's no congressional authorization from quote unquote Joe. All right. So it wasn't like that President Trump put an order out and then he left for the people that thought he left. And then Joe's in, and Joe has a congressional authorization for military. No, there's not that. And it's not a continuation order. It's not like an executive order with certain things that you can continue. Military has rules around it. The president can only use the military up to 90 days, then it requires congressional authorization. So how were all the National Guard active on 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024? The 22 and 24 are the dead giveaways. And you can go to Google and you can type it in and you can find the .mil and .gov sites that show that the National Guard were active. All right. So that shows you this is an all-out operation. All right. And all those players that you just showed in that group, this is all, they already knew this way back here. This is why President Trump said in 2020 in a debate, we have it all, we've caught them all. All right. So this is the rollout now. Back here would have been your proclamations, all right, which are timestamped for President Trump. And then when he says, oh, this guy's central casting, which he just said yesterday again, he was talking about Scott Bessent. This guy's central casting, right? He would make a great, guy actor in a movie. His central casting, right? So he's telling you the whole thing is a movie, and there will be somewhere down here some form of production where they take every bit of President Trump's speeches, proclamations, etc., and slice it like you and different people are great editors. I wouldn't be great at it, I'd be all over the board. But someone's tracking all that. And with our technology today, as you and I both know, that's going to be easy with what they're operating with. So, the whole thing is that operation. And then, Lou Dobbs, I'll rest his soul. But, the guy said this way back, I think that was 2008 or 9, somewhere in there, which would have been a big stand for him to say, because that was Obama era. And also what was going on in Venezuela. Back then they were showing how, they were having riots, massive riots all in Venezuela, and the people down there were willing to risk their lives as well. And some of them were. And they were being completely tortured and arrested and you name it for even trying to utilize their voice. And people have to keep in mind, you get away with a lot of things in the United States of America because of, the ideology and the freedoms. Even though certain protests shouldn't be out there, people don't mess with you here. Right down there in other nations, yeah, these people, some of them probably may still be in jail, even from that era, depending on how bad they were and what they did against their quote unquote government. But it's all a fake and a phony regime established. And that's why Clint Eastwood, I always bring him back, Army veteran Clint Eastwood, not just an actor. You got to remember the empty chair he put up at the Republican National Convention, and he said specifically that someday you're going to realize that Obama was the greatest fraud ever perpetrated on the American people. And you just got to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you still feel like you just can't see through the dark, you feel scared, fearful, whatever, I can assure you, just like that light's coming through right here, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. And President Trump didn't come out of retirement, if you will. I don't think he's ever retired really, but he didn't come out of the lifestyle he was living to take on all of this. He will go down in history as, and I'm not being sacrilegious whatsoever. He'll be the whatever's under Jesus Christ himself. He'll be that. And I don't mean that sacrilegiously. I mean that in the right context, of which, Mount Rushmore, hey, I've been there. Beautiful. It's a sight to see. President Trump don't need to be on Mount Rushmore. Keep Mount Rushmore like it is. Turn around, do an about face, and look over on the other side of Mount Rushmore. You'll see a rock on the other side that President Trump needs to be that whole rock on the other side. He needs to be his own figure, his own stature. And I mean that awesome. I don't mean that in any bad rhetoric, So Some
Sure.
people won't understand that, but if you want to put him on Mount Rushmore, go ahead. But he also deserves to be that other rock over there standing alone, because this is how big this operation is and how biblical, monumental, and historical it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think your point is well noted and taken that he is his own footnote independently within the annals of American history. And there's no doubt about that. Time will prove and vet that out, both short and, as you said, more importantly, in the long game of things. And then you look at the media and their coverage, of course. In Miami, they just had the first Democrat mayor there, and God knows how long. And we wonder if that's a fraud vitiates everything type of situation. So it's the unmasking is, as you said, is continuing. So appreciate that, Derek. My next question, and probably
Well,
the no,
if
yeah,
I
go ahead.
may just say
Yeah,
something real quick on
go
that
ahead.
Miami thing, if people will remember too, now our founders, they had a Republican Democrat party back then, meaning it was one party. So along the way, we've always had changes and shifts. Green Party, Independent, Whig. I mean, there's been so many different names. If you'll even look back in 1800s, there were all different kinds of parties. So if people will, though, we have kind of homed in on just two parties in America, Republican, Democrat. But keep in mind with a situation like Miami and or New York, one, we're still going to have differences even in the future. You can't make everybody fit into a one size fits all mentality, but also there's been a fundamental change in law. This is what this whole thing is. The bar exam next year, they're going to try to implement it this year, but the bar exam next year in 2026 is going to common law, and they've removed certain things. All right, that's a fundamental change up here, which means it's going to trickle down here. All right, once all this was changed, this has definitely got to change. All right, so people got to remember that the ultimate goal here is for humanity, is for the greater everything. So with a Democrat, I mean, this person could be the absolute best for Miami. All right. We don't know that yet, but I'm willing to bet that the whole thing has got to integrate back down into where we're all working together. It's not going to be the days of old Democrat, liberal, and all their, they believe in all genders in all bathrooms, whatever, in all sports. You gotta keep in mind that the future is going to be working together. So I just highly encourage people to just give it time, because the operation, this is an operation, and even the mayoral runnings and all that, they are all tied in as well. Especially in big cities. So just watch and wait.
Yes, absolutely. And time will tell, as you said, it'll all play itself out in the scheme of things. So, thank you, Derek, for going through that detail as well. So, let me just ask you this next question here. This will be the last one for the day because it's kind of a broad, overarching question, but it's one that's very timely right now and kind of plays well into what you were just sharing earlier with regards to Venezuela. As we're being reminded, the Monroe Doctrine proclaims the U.S. and Western Hemisphere was off limits to European colonization. Basically, the U.S. is control of the Western Hemisphere, Canada, U.S., Greenland, Mexico, which solidifies the remaining of the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, to be precise. On December 2nd of this year, President Trump quoted in his presidential message at the anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine, as the U.S. saying, "I'm proudly reasserting this time-honored policy to aggressively pursue an American first policy of peace through strength." So I'm going to show you a video here real quick from Glenn Beck, and then we'll go to our question and get your reaction to what you're seeing. Take a listen to this, folks, if you would, please.
In the Western Hemisphere, we should return to something that we should have never abandoned in the first place. And that's what Raisin Cain was just talking about, the Monroe Doctrine. Call it the Trump corollary. But the principle is timeless. This hemisphere is ours to secure, and hostile powers will no longer get a free pass to set up shop in our backyard. How is that controversial? Cartels, it outlines, will become a national security target. Manufacturing comes home. Partnership replaces dependency. Then it talks about Asia, and the message is really clear. We'll compete with China economically, technologically, and militarily. And we'll do it from a position of strength, not by pretending that Beijing is suddenly going to go, you know what? We're just giant friendly teddy bear. No. We're going to do it by accepting the reality and prepare accordingly. But we'll still work with you. Just don't become an enemy of ours, and we won't become an enemy of yours.
So we take that, Derek, and here's the question, the overarching question. Does President Trump view this Monroe Doctrine, 1823, and the corresponding Roosevelt Corollary, 1904, and his newly proclaimed corollary this year as the foundational pillars of a proverbial trump card in American foreign policy in terms of asserting U.S. dominance and sovereignty within the Western Hemisphere?
Well, in my opinion, yes, because that's exactly what he's that's his basis of operations. And it goes back to as simple as this. Now, whether you want to call that a law or not, it's more of a basis. And then also it goes back to the overarching question always: who owns the land, who owns the air, and who owns the water? All right. At some point, what'll happen is if you don't establish something to give people something to believe in and or support, if you don't have that, you're going to have chaos and pandemonium, because you're going to have somebody somewhere who does, and you might not like what their premise is on their law, principle, or whatever it is. Right. So we did that. We established this. Our founders were brilliant with that. Now, 1823 would have been slightly after a lot of those founders. Some were still living, some weren't. But when you look at the principle around it, our founders, when they fled and they came here, you're going to have people who say, oh, they took land from the Native Americans, da, da, da. Well, I'm a Native American, so there you go. Now I don't look like it. And I do have a lot more Irish and English than I do Native American, but I have Native American blood. So I have a little say so. And when you look at that picture, well, the liberals today, the ones who say the white man took land from the Native Americans, they still use the word Constitution out of their mouth. So I'm like, you're straight out the gate. That's hypocrisy straight out the gate. You got to choose one. You can't choose the Constitution, which was established by Anglo-Saxon white men, right? And then turn around and take up for the Native American. Those two don't go together. So your stance straight off the gate is already off. It's not even, there's no balance. It's not even off balance. That's two different continents, if you will. That's two different lily pads. Like, you need to choose one. All right. So when you go to the Monroe Doctrine and you look at the Western Hemisphere, when our founders fled, they started a war. The sole main battle cry of the Revolutionary War was taxation without representation. They were tired of being taxed and then also not having someone they could go directly to. They had to go to the British, and then the British go to the king, which means sailing over. And then they were like, we're tired of that process. So the only way they felt that they could establish something was they started a war without even documentation yet, which is hilarious. I mean, when you look at what they did, they were so hungry for a government, but a government that was set up on the right things first. So see, they wanted a government, small government, which were ran by we the people, and then laws and orders that established that. Now we have all that, and it's the polar opposite. The people don't even know who writes and passes the laws and how the laws and orders work, and bills becoming a law, and the president, what his authority. We have people who are in disarray that. So when you look at the Monroe Doctrine, the Western Hemisphere, that's setting out, hey, this is our portion of the world. You take care of yours, and like Glenn was talking about, that the stance would be is, okay, look, we don't want war. The war should be every nation's last resort. All right. We are in a place where we can talk with each other. We can get along with each other and we can trade internationally. All right. But trade at the end of the day is an added assessment. It's an accessory, right? Meaning like we don't have to have it. All right. You can get along in your own nations with what you have and what God gave you on your land, what you can grow, in certain regions and whatnot. We can get along here without you. All right. So international trade, any form of it, whether it just be even the United States to Mexico, all right, even though we're calling that our domain, even then that form of trade is still an accessory. It's not needed. We don't have to do it. We just do it because we can. All right. So at the end of the day, though, when you want to take that and make that a weapon against someone, then that's what President Trump is talking about. It's that, look, we'll compete with you and it's going to be reciprocal. That's what the tariffs are. It's like, okay, you're trying to tax us here, but you want us to give you this here. And it's like, no, we're going to make this like this, right? So it'll be fair game. So keep in mind, we don't need any of this, especially if it's going to lead to a war. So that's what this whole thing is about. It's that, look, your leaders, when President Trump's talking to these leaders, that's why people don't even understand, the liberals especially. You want to get along with Putin. You want to get along with Xi. You want to get along with Kim Jong-un. You want to get along with people that the rest deem as dictators, because those are the ones. I remind people, keep in mind, President JFK wrote a letter to the military, meaning he said we need to focus heavily on guerrilla warfare. We need to focus on it, train in it, and dominate it. Because guess what the enemy does, ladies and gentlemen? Especially when you let them stir and brew and build. All right. Guess what they do? They read everything. They do study everything, and they try to one up you on every little thing, especially if it's your weakness. So when you're the dominant of that, they can't do what? Stew and grow. All right. You keep them at a suppression level. And you can't eradicate evil, but you can keep it pretty low when you're staying up here. So see, every aspect of military strategies, tactics, warfare needs to always be at the helm on both sides, even federal, meaning like the tactics of federal, which would be not military so much, but it would be this trade, right? Hey, we need to stay on top here. We need to impose this here. We need to do this here if whatever they counter with or whatever they're doing. All right. So that's why it got so out of balance all these years. And whenever, I'm sure they will somehow in history show you what the balance actually was. They've already done that with NATO. They've already done that with certain things where we were pulling all of the weight, but these nations weren't pulling any weight. So at some point, you got to realize we're digging a hole somewhere. All right. And we're in the red numbers. We're not in the black. All right. And we're not at break even because no one's pulling their weight over there. So this ties into a lot of things. So but specifically the Monroe Doctrine, the Western Hemisphere, and that's what ties into the whole operation in Venezuela, the Caribbean Sea. And I have documents, not a whole lot because my phone was getting overclouded, but I have quite a few aircraft, special operations, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which have a joint partnership with the Coast Guard of Colombia. All right, so there's all kinds of operations that's been going on in the Caribbean since April 1st, 2020 to present day. All right, which ties into your War Powers Resolution Act, which ties into the Western Hemisphere, which ties into President Trump's executive orders way back 2020. One specifically, Executive Order 13919 on April the 30th, 2020, specifically says inside of it, the enhanced counter narcotics operation in the Western Hemisphere. All right, specifically in this executive order. Now, what's cool about that order is it's a Title 10 invocation of Section 12304, not 2. 12304. 12304, ladies and gentlemen, requires 2 years advanced funding, which means that it was strategically and pre-planned 2 years before, because it requires that for funding of it. All right, which would be a Defense Authorization Act. Well, so that's what Section 1550, why it's so important. You've heard me talking about it, and it's just now coming to fruition into the public. That's what they're talking about right now. That, oh, we're going to block the U.S. military because there's no congressional authorization. Yes, there is. Oh, there most certainly is. And it would have a clause in there somewhere, somehow. There would be a termination of it if it wasn't still active. And in that 1550, the codification, it says it's temporarily entered in the war powers. So it's not for future presidents. So it's going to have a clause that says this is no longer active when it's no longer active, which means it's still active today. So that's 5, or we're working on April 2026 to be 6 years old. All right. And the president, via the War Powers Act, has 90 days, 60 days, and a 30-day extension to use the military. After that 90 days, if Congress has not authorized that, he has to withdraw the troops. I'm pretty sure April 1st, 2020 to present day is well over 90 business days. All right. Whether you're working with 90 business or 90 regular, it doesn't matter. It's well over both of those. So how are the National Guard, the reserve components, the military special operations, irregular? There's your irregular special operations. In that clause of 1550, it says regular and irregular military forces. Irregular would be your special operations, your clandestine and covert, and militias even. All right. So that's what everybody's witnessing. So this is the classic bait. We're baiting you up. You just now, the ones who are just now hearing about the War Powers Resolution, they're baiting them up. Bait, 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 bait. And then somewhere there's going to be either an interpretation by the Supreme Court or an appeals court, or somewhere there's going to be that most President Trump most certainly can, or they're going to either show you that how he's doing it. Something's going to be you get the bait, but there's going to be a switch somewhere. And you can already know that by just knowing how the laws and the orders operate and function, and that authorization is already in there, and it was put there December the 20th, 2019. All right, that's how old it is, but it's not old. It's relevant, it's active, it's open, and still running. So that's what's taking place, and that Western Hemisphere all ties into that. Now, I don't foresee anything else. I mean, everybody pretty much capitulated. Argentina capitulated to President Trump. Brazil capitulated to President Trump. A lot of those, of course, a lot of those other nations we weren't really involved in. Colombia is one of our joint partners with the operation that Southern Command launched, the counter narcotics, which just now got its name, Operation Southern Spear. So all those nations capitulated. The only one who didn't is Venezuela. And obviously, because it's a fake regime, it was an installed regime. And then also the executive order by Obama. So see, this is another win for President Trump, because that's a executive order with a national emergency by Obama, which would have drug out 30, 40 years had this operate. It probably wouldn't have, because we would have collapsed as a nation monetarily. But theoretically, like the other executive orders, Iran executive order 12170, it's older than me. So it's drug out almost 47 years, active, continued every year, which means Congress continued it every year. Well, what were they getting? Kickbacks. That's what you call a kickback, like that list. People would say, well, how could you get a kickback with Venezuela? Look at the list. All right. They were getting what? Money to keep doing what? Voting for things for Venezuela. If something hits the desk of Venezuela, hey, you vote yes on this, or no, depending on what it is. Yes or no, depending on what it is. And their yay or no, depending on if it was a support. The yay was a support, no was a support. Here's your money.
Exactly. Yeah. Thankfully, it's older than both of us. But yeah, it's a very interesting points that you make that correlate well. And just to put a nice bow on the end of this podcast for today, Derek, is I showed this article. I didn't have time to pull it up now because I was just thinking about it as you were sharing. But another patriot put out there on TikTok, amongst the many, that we're definitely going. Everything you're saying ultimately trends us back to a constitutional republic. People are seeing that being in the movie reframed. That's, I think, the overarching point. And inside of that, this Truther was talking about January 20th, President Trump is going to switch the IRS to the ERS. And then interesting, in the corporation, January 20th is typically an inauguration day. And yet that's when it's happening. So that seemed a very significant time frame in the construct of what we're talking about. So as we close for today, Derek, as always, last thoughts that you have for the audience, and where can people find your work, please?
Well, yeah, and speaking about that, that's also why they had originally moved the inauguration date from March 4th to that January 20th to fit more into the fiscal budget of the United States. So see, that directly ties into it, saying that, hey, we're homing in even more. We're going to put it specifically here. And so there's just, outside of God, and I know some people get tired of hearing that as well, but I mean, look, only God could allow this. But see, God, it's like I tell people, you can lean on a shovel and pray for a hole, but it's not going to dig the hole. All right, you got to do that. So that's why God commanded his people to do what? To work. And it says to tarry until I come back. Well, we don't know what all kind of combats he has, whether it be physical and take you out of here or whatever. There's all kinds, right? But, it just says that. So we're to work. We're to do our part, and we're to pull our part. That is what a republic is. A democracy is not so much that. If people really knew what an actual democracy looked like, they wouldn't be using that word out of their mouth whatsoever. Just briefly, a democracy, you could have 51% liberals, 49% Republican, conservative, patriot, and you're going to do what that 51% says, or fight. And if you're not willing to fight, then they're going to dominate. In a republic, you could have 99% think like we the patriots do. All right, but that 1 percentile could be gay, Buddhist, atheist, blah, 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 whatever. And we don't infringe on their individual rights. We don't tell them how they're going to live their life. We just vote the way we're going to live our life, and they have to live in it, and they benefit from it, whether they like it or not. Real simple. So that's the things I teach about, along with the 45-47, which is the strategic special operation. And that's how you tie all this together. Find your voice. My job is not to persuade you to love President Trump, to like President Trump, to vote for President Trump. My job and role as a retired veteran, but also doing what I'm doing with the badge I have, is straight up to show you the laws and the orders, to show you how they are applied, show you their origin and their meaning and where they came from. And here's what they mean. Here's how you make them applicable to you, which is your civil authority, responsibility, and duty. And that's prescribed in the Declaration of Independence, which is a little bit more important than the Constitution. Abraham Lincoln has also quoted that in history. So he's passed. You can't argue with him. So you have to take it for verbatim. All right. So the best place, because there's so many fraudulent accounts out there, the best place to find me is my link tree, LINKTR, period is where the period goes, /1776 Nation. If there's not a social media platform on that link tree, it's not mine. So if you stumble on one out there, you go to that link tree. If that URL is not on that link tree, it's not mine. So if you're on my link tree, then you'll be following all my correct pages anyway. That's the whole point of it. So those are the correct. And if you find one out there that's not on that link tree, it's not correct. You follow all those on the link tree. And I validate my link tree on my blue chat and red chat pages. So that way there's no confusion on both sides, depending on how you find it.
Great. Appreciate it, Derek. As always, we'll leave those links below in the description of this podcast. We appreciate that. And folks, as you know, silver is doing nothing but going up. It's already over 61 and will continue to climb. Noble Gold, our chief sponsor for the podcast, is a great company with which to work. I certainly use them myself and have appreciated the work of Colin and many of the people on the team for years. Arguably, December is one of the largest months for delivery with silver. And so what they're doing for any qualified accounts, whether that's, retail sales, IRA, 401k, whatever the case may be for you, they're giving away 10 1-ounce silver minted coins, custom 999 silver. So please check them out in the description and below this video. Derek Johnson, thank you for joining the podcast. We really appreciate it. From us to you, have a wonderful Merry Christmas in Christ. Happy New Year 2026. And we look forward to talking with you in the new year.
See you next year.
Yes,
Merry
sir.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.